Teddy Swims walked onto the set of the Kelly Clarkson Show with his signature easy swagger. A patterned shirt hanging loosely over black jeans, gold chains catching the studio lights as he waved to the cheering audience. His beard framed a warm smile, and he moved with the relaxed confidence of a performer who had been riding a wave of success, chart-topping singles, sold-out shows, and a devoted fan base that adored his soulful voice and candid personality. Kelly greeted him with an enthusiastic hug, the kind that looked effortless to the audience, but had been practiced over years of hosting. The energy was light and playful at first. They joked about his endless touring schedule, his obsession with late-night diner food, and the tattoos that seemed to multiply between each appearance. Teddy laughed easily, leaning into the couch cushions, seemingly ready for a smooth, upbeat segment about his new album and upcoming tour. But the conversation took its first unexpected turn when Kelly, after a brief pause to glance at her cue, Cart said with a teasing grin, "So, you've had a big year, musically and personally. There's been some chatter online about a certain canceled Nashville date and a little behind-the-scenes drama." The audience reacted instantly, a mix of laughter and murmurs, sensing gossip. Teddy's smile didn't drop, but his posture shifted ever so slightly, one hand coming to rest on his knee, eyes narrowing just enough for the cameras to catch if they were looking. "You know how people talk," he said lightly, his tone friendly but measured. Kelly chuckled, tilting her head in mock innocence. "I'm just saying, fans want to know what really happened." Teddy shook his head with a faint smile. "Fans should focus on the music. That's what really matters." The audience clapped, but the reaction felt more curious than supportive, like they were waiting for him to give more. Kelly let the moment hang for a beat too long, her gaze fixed on him, and in that silence, a subtle tension began to coil between them. The first crack in what had seemed like an easy, comfortable interview. Kelly let out a small, knowing laugh, the kind that works as both a charm and a challenge. "Okay, but you have to admit," she said, leaning slightly toward him, "you don't cancel a sold-out Nashville show unless something big went down." The audience chuckled again, a low ripple of anticipation moving through the crowd.
80s.
Smile stayed in place, but there was a fractional pause before he spoke. "Sometimes life happens," he replied, his voice still even, but with a slight edge that hadn't been there a moment earlier. Kelly nodded, but there was a gleam in her eyes now, the look of a host who sensed there might be more to mine. "Sure, but there were pictures floating around online from that night. You were seen leaving the venue early, looking, let's just say, less than happy." The crowd reacted with a chorus of playful oohs, and Teddy gave a short laugh. That didn't quite reach his eyes. "I think we've all had days where we weren't smiling for the cameras," he said. "Doesn't mean it's a scandal," Kelly grinned, shaking her head. "You're too good at dodging the question." Teddy raised his eyebrows. "Or maybe I'm just not giving a question like that the time of day." That earned a few scattered claps, but the air in the studio was shifting. The laughter from the crowd had softened into a tense hum, and the co-host on the far end of the couch was starting to look from one to the other like a spectator at a tennis match. From the wings, a producer gestured for Kelly to move on, but instead she tilted her head and said, "You know your fans love you for being real. If something happened, wouldn't it be better to just say it?" Teddy sat back, clasping his hands together. "Being real doesn't mean telling strangers every detail of my life," he said, his tone firmer now. The audience murmured, picking up on the subtle change in his delivery. Kelly smiled again, but it was tighter this time, almost as if she felt the pushback and chose to lean into it rather than retreat. "Fair enough," she said. "But you know this clip is going to be all over social media by tonight." Teddy gave her a long, measured look, and in that glance, there was no mistaking it. His patience was starting to fray. Asterisk. The next question came with the kind of sugary tone that could almost disguise the sharpness underneath, but Teddy caught it instantly. "Gah." Kelly leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, and said, "So, I have to ask, because it's what everyone's been talking about, is that new song of yours about someone in the industry who betrayed you?" The audience erupted into a wave of ohs, some leaning forward in their seats as if bracing for impact. Let out a slow breath, his eyes fixed on her for a moment before he answered, It's about feelings I've experienced," he said, each word measured. "If people want to see themselves in it, that's on them." Kelly gave a playful laugh, tilting her head. "But it's so specific, Teddy. You sing about late-night phone calls and empty promises that sounds like it came from somewhere real." The crowd laughed, sensing the push, but Teddy's smile didn't return this time. "A lot of art comes from somewhere real," he said. "That doesn't mean I'm naming names on your couch." The tension in the room thickened, the sound of the audience's laughter fading into a murmur. The co-host shifted in his seat, clearly debating whether to intervene, but Kelly pressed again. "Don't you think clearing the air would stop all the rumors?" Teddy leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees now, voice lower but more direct. "Sometimes people don't want the truth. They want a story, not here. To give them one." That line drew a soft but audible reaction from the audience, a mix of surprise and admiration. Kelly, however, gave a short laugh that had lost its earlier warmth. "Well, you're definitely not making my job easy today." Teddy didn't miss a beat. "I'm not here to make it easy," he replied, and the room went still. Even the steady hum of the cameras seemed quieter as the weight of the exchange settled over the set. Somewhere off stage, a producer made the wrap-it-up motion more urgently now. But the invisible line between host and guest had already shifted. This was no longer friendly banter. It was a polite standoff playing out in real time. Kelly's smile remained fixed, but her tone had shifted, carrying a sharper undertone that even the audience could pick up on now. "You know, Teddy," she said, leaning back in her chair, "I've had a lot of guests on this couch, and the best moments happen when people open up. When they let us see the messy parts. You're holding back so much, it's like you're afraid to be vulnerable." The audience reacted with a mix of light chuckles and murmurs, but Teddy didn't laugh. He sat still for a moment, his gaze locked on Kelly, then said slowly, "Not everyone needs to bleed for the camera to prove they're real." A low "oh" rippled through the crowd, and the co-host's eyebrows shot up slightly. Kelly gave a quick laugh, raising her hands as if to play off the tension. "Hey, I'm just saying people connect to honesty." Teddy's voice stayed calm, but the edge was undeniable now. Honesty isn't the same thing as putting your private life on display. A producer off to the side was motioning frantically for Kelly to pivot. She pressed on, perhaps feeling the need to regain control. "But don't you think your fans deserve to know the stories behind the songs they love?" Teddy's smile returned, but it was the tight, practiced smile of someone done entertaining the point. "They deserve the music," he said, "not a gossip column." The audience's reaction this time was louder, a mixture of applause and gasps. Sensing that the exchange had crossed into something more personal, Kelly's own smile stiffened. "You're making it sound like I'm here to dig up dirt," she said. "If it feels like that, maybe it's because that's what's happening." The crowd responded with a collective whoa, the atmosphere in the studio shifting from uneasy amusement to rapt attention. Air felt dense, as if everyone was waiting to see who would blink first. Kelly took a breath, visibly trying to reset the tone, but Teddy had already shifted his posture, sitting forward, elbows on his knees as though he was one decision, away from ending the conversation on his own terms. The pause that followed was thick enough to feel like its own presence in the room. Kelly shifted in her seat, glancing briefly toward the audience before trying again. "Look, Teddy, I think you know I'm a huge fan," she said, her voice attempting warmth, "but sometimes when you shut down, it feels like you're keeping a wall between you and the people who care about you most." The crowd murmured softly, sensing yet another poke at the bruise. Teddy inhaled slowly, his hands clasped loosely in front of him. "Or maybe I'm protecting something that matters to me," he said, the words calm but weighted. Kelly gave a quick, almost nervous laugh. "I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable," she said. "I just think people appreciate honesty." Teddy's expression didn't change. "I'm being honest when I say I'm not going to talk about that here." A beat of silence fell, and the co-host looked down at his notes, as if avoiding eye contact might help the moment pass. Kelly leaned in once more, her tone lightly insistent. "Even just a little hint. For the fans?" That was the breaking point. Teddy's eyes flicked toward her, and this time there was no mistaking the shift. The warmth was gone. He reached up, fingers finding the small microphone clipped to his shirt. The audience reacted instantly with a chorus of gasps, and the stage manager froze mid-gesture in the wings. "I think we're done," Teddy said simply, unclipping the mic and wrapping the cable around it with practiced ease. Kelly's eyes widened. "Wait, are you?" she began, but Teddy was already standing, his patterned shirt shifting as he rose from the couch. The murmur in the audience swelled, mixing shock with the thrill of witnessing a moment that was clearly not scripted. "Came here to talk about the album," he said, not raising his voice but making sure the words carried. "If this isn't about that, I'm out." He handed the microphone to a startled crew member, gave a brief nod toward the audience, and turned toward the edge of the stage. Each step was steady, deliberate, the kind that said this wasn't a spur-of-a-moment flare-up, but a conscious decision. The cameras followed instinctively, capturing the swing of his gold chains and the faint glint of the stage lights in his beard as he walked off. By the time he disappeared into the shadows of the wing, the audience was buzzing, their reactions split between disbelief and awe. Kelly sat still for a moment, her cue cards resting unused in her lap, before she forced a small smile toward the camera. But it was already too late. The image of Teddy rising from that couch and walking away was the only thing anyone in the room would remember. Asterisk. For a moment after Teddy disappeared into the wings, the studio felt as if someone had pulled the plug on its energy. The audience, still buzzing from what they had just witnessed, shifted in their seats with a mix of excitement, disbelief, and second-hand awkwardness. A few people murmured to their neighbors, others glanced toward the stage entrance as though half expecting him to reappear. Kelly sat frozen for a heartbeat, her cue cards limp in her hands, before forcing a quick smile that didn't quite meet. Her eyes, well, live TV, folks, she said with a faint laugh. It's a kind of line that's supposed to break the tension but only underlines it when the room isn't ready to move on. The co-host leaned forward, his tone overly bright. "That was unexpected," he said, drawing a ripple of uneasy laughter from the audience. Off to the side, a producer's voice crackled urgently in Kelly's earpiece, instructing her to pivot hard into the next segment. "Reset, reset, reset," came the muffled directive from the control room. Kelly took a quick breath and tried to regain her rhythm. "We love Teddy," she said, glancing toward the wings again. "Sometimes conversations go in different directions. But his music is incredible, and you should definitely check out his new album." It was an olive branch, but the absence on the couch next to her made it feel hollow. Behind the cameras, crew members were in motion, one darting toward the backstage hallway where Teddy had gone, another conferring with the floor manager, their gestures sharp and hurried. The audience clapped politely when prompted, but the applause was patchy, a reflection of how far the mood had shifted. Even as Kelly introduced the next guest with her usual smile, her eyes carried the weight of the moment that had just unfolded. The cameras might have been moving on, but everyone in that room, from the front row to the last grip on the lighting rig, knew. The clip was already being etched into the internet's collective memory. In the control room, an assistant producer was already on the phone with the show's PR team, while another pulled the segment's raw feed for review. "That's our viral moment," someone muttered under their breath, and another replied, "Yeah, but not the kind we planned for." By the time the taping wrapped, the story was already taking on a life of its own, whispered about in the hallways, and tweeted from the phones of audience members who had just seen a major artist stand his ground and walk off, live in front of millions.